Starting at the front of the vehicle, I'm going to check to make sure there are no puddles of any oil or engine fluids underneath the vehicle. I want to check and make sure that the vehicle is not leaning to the right or the left, which could be an indicator of bad suspension or a flat tire. I want to check my clearance lights at the top of the vehicle, make sure that they are the correct color, which is amber. They're not cracked, broken, damaged, and there's no water condensation built up inside it, and they're securely mounted to the vehicle. Next, I want to check my headlights, my high beams and low beams. Check to make sure that they are not cracked, damaged. They're the proper color, which is clear or white, and there is no condensation built up inside there. They're securely mounted to the vehicle. Also, I want to check my left and right turn indicators, my four-way flashers, and marker lights along the bottom. We'll check those, make sure that they are in good condition. They're securely mounted to the vehicle. They're not cracked or damaged. There's no water condensation built up inside, and they are the proper color, which is amber. Inside here, we have a reflector. So we'll also want to check reflectors, make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. That they're also clean. Next, I'm going to open the hood and check the engine compartment area. I'm going to start over on the passenger side, and I'm only going to check items that are unique to this side. Here is where we fill the windshield washer fluid. I want to make sure that the cap is not missing, cracked, damaged, and that it has plenty of washer fluid in there. This is my coolant reservoir. I want to check and make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken. It's not leaking. The cap is in place and tight. It's not leaking. And I'm checking the hoses coming from the coolant reservoir, making sure that they're not cracked, bent, bulging, or leaking, and they're all securely mounted on both ends. And I'm going to do that for the same with all these hoses, electrical lines. I'm just checking to make sure that everything's secure, they're not cracked, damaged, broken, and securely mounted on both ends, and there's no leaks. Also over here, under here, back inside here is our water pump. I want to check the water pump, make sure that it is securely connected, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, it's not cracked or damaged, and it's not leaking. The water pump is belt driven, so I want to check the belt, make sure that it's not cracked or damaged, it's doesn't have any cuts, and there's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play in the belt between pulleys. And that's it for the passenger side that's unique. So I'm going to go over here to the driver's side and start inspecting. Okay, so here we have a coolant hose. I want to check and make sure that it's not cracked or damaged, it's not leaking, and securely mounted on both ends. And do the same over on this side. I want to check all my hoses just in general, make sure they're not cracked, damaged, or leaking. They're not chafing. So all these little hoses back inside here I want to inspect, all these electrical lines down under here, and just make sure that everything is securely mounted and there are no leaks. Then I want to check the side and the front of the engine, the tops, and then underneath down in here, checking just for signs of leaking, so to make sure that there are no engine fluid or any other kind of leaks. And I'm going to start up here. This is my power steering fluid reservoir. I want to check to make sure that it's securely mounted. It's not cracked, damaged, or leaking. The cap is in place and it's at the proper level, so above the minimum and at or below the maximum. From there, I'll check the hoses coming down to the power steering pump, the power steering box. Make sure that it's not cracked or damaged, securely mounted to the frame. There's no loose or missing bolts or nuts, and there are no leaks. I want to check the steering column, making sure that it's in place, it's not cracked or damaged or broken, there's nothing rubbing up against it, The universal joint here is in good condition. There's nothing lodged in between here. It's properly lubricated and connected properly. No cracks or damage. And I want to check the hoses coming off of the steering box to make sure that they are all connected properly. They're not cracked or damaged. They're bulging. They're securely mounted on both ends, and there are no leaks. Then I also want to follow these lines over to the power steering pump. So the power steering pump is located way in the back in that general area where the air compressor is. So the pump, we're checking to make sure that it's not cracked or damaged or leaking. It's securely mounted. There's no loose or missing nuts and bolts, and it is gear driven, as well as the air compressor, which is rather difficult to see in this, but it is back inside here. And we're checking to make sure that it is securely mounted. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. There's no cracks or damage or leaks. That could be air leaks or oil leaks. And the air compressor is also gear driven. We want to check the hoses and everything coming off of the air compressor to make sure that they're not leaking, they're not cracked or damaged or broken, bulging and securely mounted on both ends. Then inside here, it's difficult to see again. This is the alternator. So we're checking the alternator, making sure that it is securely mounted. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken. And the wiring is connected properly on the back end. There's no loose wires coming to it, and there is no corrosion on the terminals. Now, the alternator is also belt driven. So we want to inspect the belt here, make sure that it is not cracked or damaged, it's not frayed or torn or cut. It's securely seated in the pulley, and there's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play between the pulleys. Next, we have our oil dipstick here. We want to check that, make sure that the oil is at the proper level. You would remove the dipstick, clean it off, insert it all the way inside the tube, and then pull it back out and check to make sure it's at the proper level, which is above the minimum and at or below the maximum. You also want to make sure that it is not overfilled with oil. Okay. So coming back over here, again we have the steering column, the steering box, the hoses, and then we have the steering linkage. So the steering linkage, this is the pitman arm, this is the drag link, this is the upper control arm, and then there's a lower control arm back here, and then this is the tie rod, and that's going across to the other side. So we're checking these to make sure that they're securely mounted, they're not cracked or damaged or broken, they're not bent any way that they're not supposed to be. We're checking these castle nuts here and the cotter pin, making sure that they're in place, they're not over tightened or too loose, and everything is secure. Back here, we're checking these bushings to make sure that they're in good condition. They're not cracked or damaged or splitting. So again, here's the castle nut, here's the cotter key, and then the joint there. Okay, now for the suspension, we've got our spring mounts. The spring mount is here, and that's including all of this there, all of this here. We're checking to make sure it's not cracked, damaged, or broken. There's not illegally repair welded. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and securely mounted to the frame. Next, we have the leaf springs. So the leaf springs, we're checking to make sure they're securely mounted to the mount. We've got this bolt here. We want to make sure that that's in place and not cracked, damaged, loose, or missing. Inside here we have bushings. We want to make sure that those are in place and not worn out or missing, damaged. The leaf springs, we're checking to make sure that they are not cracked or damaged. They're not bent the wrong direction, and they're not scissoring, so that they're nice and straight, stacked on each other. Here we have the U-bolts, here and here. So the U-bolts, we're checking to make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. The nuts are in place and tight, not split damaged or loose. And our spacer is in here. It's good condition, not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. So we have our forward mounts and then our rear mounts in the back. We also need to mention, so let me see if I can get a better view of that. Not really, but anyway, that's the rear mount. Next, we have our shock absorber. So this is our shock absorber. We're checking to make sure it's securely mounted on the top and the bottom. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. There's no damaged bushings. It's not bent, cracked, or leaking. Okay, so next we want to check the brake system. Here's the brake air hose, air line coming from the truck to the brake chamber. This, we want to make sure it's connected properly. It's not loose, cracked, damaged, frayed, bulging, and it's securely mounted on both ends, and there are no leaks. The brake chamber, we're checking to make sure that it is securely mounted to the brackets here. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. There's no bends, dings, damage, dents. This clamp here is in place and securely fastened, not cracked, damaged, or missing, and there are no leaks on the brake chamber. Next is the push rod. That's coming out of the brake chamber. That's this part here. Checking to make sure that it's coming straight out of the brake chamber. It's not cracked, bent, broken, or damaged. And it's securely connected to the slack adjuster here with these pins and cotter keys. Want to make sure that they are not broken, cracked, missing, or damaged. The slack adjuster, so this whole piece here, checking to make sure that it is not cracked, damaged, broken, it's seated on there properly, and it's properly lubricated. Next, inside here, we have our brake drum, so that's this outer part here. Want to check and make sure that it's not cracked, damaged, or broken. There's no illegal repair welds. It's not worn dangerously thin. It's smooth on the inside. Also checking to make sure there's no oil or debris inside the brake drum, and that there are no signs of overheating, such as bluing or little stress fractures. This is the brake lining. The brake lining, we just want to check and make sure that it's not cracked or damaged. It's not separating from this metal backing plate. Want to check and make sure that it is more than 1/4 of an inch thick, and it's seated all the way inside the drum, and not cracked, damaged, or broken. Next, I want to check the wheels and tires. So I'll start with the tires. I want to check the outside of the tires, so the sidewalls on the inside, outside, and the top here, the tread. Checking for cuts, bulges, abrasions, any gashes or damage to it. And on the top here, checking to make sure there's even tread wear. It's not worn too thin. There's no chunks of tread missing, and there's no nails or screws or anything protruding from that. Want to check next the minimum tread depth. On steer tires is a minimum tread depth of 4/32. And then we want to check the inflation of the tires. To check the inflation, let's use the valve stem here. Make sure that it's not cracked, bent, or damaged. It has a cap in place and secure. I would check my air pressure here using a tire gauge to make sure that the tires are inflated to the manufacturer's suggested level. Next, we have our rims. I want to check around the tires here, make sure we have a good bead. It's not bent, cracked, or damaged. The rest of the rim here, we're checking to make sure there are no cracks, damage, or welds. Want to check and make sure that it's not dented or cracking anywhere, and especially in between these spots here. I want to check next the lug nuts, so making sure that they're all present and that they're all tight. Want to make sure the nuts are not cracked, damaged, or split, and the studs, or these bolts here, we want to make sure that they are not bent, damaged, or missing. As well, we want to check for signs of looseness, which could be shiny threads here. Want to make sure that if there are shiny threads, we would check that using a wrench to see if it's loose, and if you can turn it with a wrench, then it is not properly torqued down. Also, another sign of looseness could be rust streaks. They're coming from under here, coming straight out. Okay. We want to make sure there are no rust streaks. And then we also want to make sure that we're checking to see that the bolt holes in the rims are not distorted or elongated. Next, we have the hub seal, the hub axle seal. We want to make sure that it is not cracked, damaged. All these bolts are in place. The rubber stopper is there. Make sure it's at the proper fluid level and that there are no leaks. Moving on from the engine compartment area, next we have from the driver door fuel area to the rear of the vehicle. And that's also checking the underside of the vehicle. So we're going to start with the mirror brackets, making sure it's securely mounted to the door or the truck. They're not cracked, damaged, or broken, and not wiggling around. We're going to check the glass on the mirrors, making sure that they're not cracked or damaged, they're clean, and there's no illegally placed stickers. Next, I want to check the door. I want to make sure that it opens and closes properly. Make sure that it closes all the way. And then inside, I want to check the door hinges, making sure that they're not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. And I also want to check the weather stripping on these doors all the way around, making sure that that is all in place and not leaking. So the door appears to be operating correctly. Here we have a side light. This is a marker light and turn indicator and a four-way flasher. I want to make sure that it's proper color, which is amber. It's securely mounted to the vehicle. It's not cracked or damaged, and no signs of condensation built up inside. Next, I want to check the steps. The steps, we're checking to make sure that they're not cracked or damaged or bent. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's securely mounted to the belly strap here of the fuel tank, and there's nothing on here that could cause you to slip or fall, so no oil or ice or any kind of debris. After that, I'm going to go ahead and check the catwalk. I'm going to check it for all the same things there. It's securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Not going to be moving around, not damaged. There's nothing on there that could cause you to slip or fall, like oil or ice. Back to the fuel tank. We're going to check the entire tank, make sure that it's not cracked or damaged. Pay special attention to the underside of the tank, making sure it's not severely dented, cracked, damaged, or no leaks all the way around. Want to check the fuel cap, making sure that it's in place, it's secure, it's not leaking, and that it has the rubber seal on the inside. Then also with the fuel tank, we're checking the strap here, making sure that's in place, it's securely connected to the frame, and it has this rubber gasket between the strap and the fuel tank so you don't have metal on metal damage. Coming back, we're going to check the back of the cab, checking the glass, making sure it's not cracked, damaged, or broken, and then checking just the whole wall area here, making sure there's no holes or damage. I'm going to check the exhaust system. So here's the muffler and the pipe, and then all the piping going down underneath the truck and then all the way to the engine. I'm going to inspect that, make sure that it's securely mounted, there's no cracks or damage, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that there's no signs of leaking, such as black soot coming through any of the spots in the piping. Next, I want to check the frame of the truck. I'm going to check from the front to the back, checking to make sure that it's not cracked or damaged or twisted, it's not illegally welded. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts or any holes or anything where it should have hardware. I want to check the cross members here, making sure they're connected properly, they're not cracked or damaged, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Then, under here we have our drive shaft. I want to check the drive shaft, make sure it's securely connected on both ends. We have our universal joints here. Make sure that they're connected properly. They're not cracked or damaged. No loose or missing nuts and bolts. And it is properly lubricated. The drive shaft also, we're checking to make sure that there's nothing rubbing up against it while it's spinning and it's not twisted. Okay, next we've got our rear suspension. For the rear suspension, this is our spring mounts. Checking to make sure that they're not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts and bolts. Securely mounted to the frame. And there's no illegal repair welds. We have our leaf springs down here. And they're going across here. Want to check those, make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. They're securely mounted to the mounts here with these bolts and nuts. There's no loose or missing hardware, and there's no missing bushings or damaged bushings inside here. And we're also checking to make sure it's not cracked and scissored. Coming to the back of the truck for the suspension. In here we have our shock absorber. It's difficult to see, but it's securely mounted on the top and the bottom. It's not cracked, damaged, or broken, and it is not leaking. Here we have our airbags. The airbags, checking to make sure that they are not bulging, cracked, or damaged. They're not leaking. We're checking the mounts on the top and the bottom, making sure they're securely mounted to the frame and this plate. No loose or missing nuts or bolts, not cracked or illegally repair welding. Okay, for this video I dropped the trailer so that we can actually see some of these parts a little bit better that we're inspecting. So there's the spring mount there. There's the shock absorber. Here's the springs, checking to make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken, missing. Here's the U-bolts. Want to check those, making sure that they're not cracked or damaged or missing. On the bottom there, the nuts are in place. They're not cracked, damaged, or loose. The spacer along the top here is connected properly. It's not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. And then we're going to go over to the brakes. Here, let me see. We have the brake hoses here going to the brake chamber. I want to check those, make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. They're not leaking, they're not bulging, and they're securely mounted on both ends. The brake chamber, we're checking to make sure that it's not cracked or damaged, that it's not leaking. We want to check and make sure this clamp is in place, not damaged or loose, or both of these clamps. And then making sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. Now down here on the other side is the push rod and the slack adjuster. Checking those to make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. We're checking to make sure that there's no more than 1 inch of play in the slack adjuster or in the push rod, and the slack adjuster is securely connected, not cracked or damaged or coming apart. Also, that is properly lubricated. Then inside here, again, we have the brake drums and lining. We're checking those for the same things that we checked in the front. The U-bolts. Back here, we're checking the tires, making sure that they're not cracked, damaged, bulging. So this is the sidewalls and the top. No chunks of tread missing, and no nails or anything. They're not leaking. No cuts, bulges, or abrasions on the sidewalls. The minimum tread depth on the drive tires is 2/32. So minimum of 2/32 on both of these. And then we're going to check the inflation. And there we would find the valve stem, make sure that it is not cracked, damaged, or bent. And then using a tire gauge, we would check and make sure that it's inflated to the proper level. The wheels, making sure they're not cracked, damaged, or broken. There's no illegal repair welds. And lug nuts, making sure they're all tight and present, not missing, no signs of looseness or elongated bolt holes or distorted bolt holes through the rim. No shiny threads or rust streaks coming off of that. Want to check the axle seal, making sure that it's not cracked, damaged, or broken. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and there's no leaks. Now here we also have our bud spacing area. So these are bud rims. So in here, we want to check and make sure that there's no debris, no rocks or boards or anything. It's nice and clean. Want to make sure that the tires are not touching, especially down there on the bottom. And want to make sure that there's no gap between the rims here. So you shouldn't see any daylight gap between there. And there's no cracks or damage. Okay, coming to the back, got our splash guards. Want to make sure that they're all connected properly. They're not cut, torn, or frayed. They're covering the width of the tires and at least 50% of the tires. It's not touching the ground and it's not touching the tires inside. Also need to make sure that we have the proper reflective tape on the back there. While I'm back here, I'm going to check the lights. So we have our brake lights, right and left turn indicator, our four-way flasher, and our marker lights. Want to make sure that they're securely mounted, they're not cracked or damaged or missing, and they're the proper color, which is red. This is our reverse light. Want to check and make sure that it's securely mounted, not cracked or damaged, and the proper color is white. And then under here is our license plate light. We'll check those for the same things. Now inside here, this is the torque arm. So the torque arm, it's connected to the frame there and the differential here. Want to make sure it's not cracked, damaged, broken, or bent, and it's in place. For the coupling system, I'm going to start with my air and electrical lines. So here's my electrical line connected to the tractor. I want to check and make sure that it is securely plugged into the tractor, that this latch and lid is in place, latching that, keeping that from coming out. I want to check the electrical line all the way down and over to the trailer side. Make sure that there are no cuts or abrasions. There's no splits or anything in the insulation here, and I can't see any wires inside, and there's no illegal repairs like electrical tape. And then I want to check the trailer side, making sure it's securely mounted, it's not cracked or damaged, it's plugged in all the way, this cap is in place, and those it's latched and locking that in there. Next we have our air lines. So this is our red emergency line and our blue service line. That's connected to the trailer with glad hands. So I'm going to check these glad hands, making sure they're not cracked or damaged or split. They're seated properly with each other. And I want to make sure that the seals on the inside are in good condition. It's downside here, this crack there. Make sure that they're not split, damaged, or missing. Want to check the air hoses all the way over to where it's connected to the tractor side, making sure that there's no bulges, cuts, abrasions, there's no leaks or holes, and then it's connected properly to the tractor with no leaks or any damage. Also, we want to check and make sure that these lines are above the surface here. They're not hitting or rubbing up against anything, so that they also don't get caught on anything while you're making turns. Okay, so that's our air and electrical lines. Next, down here, we've got our platform. That's this part. We're checking to make sure that it's not cracked, damaged, or broken, or dented or bent in any way. We want to check all our mounting bolts, all these here, and across here, making sure they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. Want to check the fifth wheel skid plate. That's this, making sure that it's secure, it's not bent or damaged, and properly lubricated, it's not twisted, it's properly secured to the platform. Now this is also a sliding fifth wheel, so we want to check these locking pins here, making sure they're in place. That keeps this from moving. Next, I want to check the apron. So that's this trailer side here, making sure this is not cracked or damaged, securely mounted to the trailer, and it is properly lubricated. Also want to check and make sure that there is no daylight gap between the apron and the fifth wheel skid plate. Here we have our release arm, making sure it's not cracked, damaged, or broken, and all the components on the inside. There's no bent or broken, missing, or loose pieces in there. Want to make sure that head is all connected properly and that it's pushed all the way in, indicating that it is in the correct locked position. Now, inside here, this is the locking jaw. Want to check the locking jaw, make sure that it's all the way across the opening here, locking the kingpin inside the fifth wheel. It's not cracked, bent, broken, or damaged, and all these pieces underneath here, connections, don't have any loose or missing hardware or damage to them. Also inside here is our kingpin. I want to check the kingpin to make sure it's not bent, cracked, damaged, broken, and securely mounted to the apron of the trailer. So next we have the coupling system. For the coupling system, again, drop the trailer so that I can show you all the parts a little bit better. First off, we're going to start here with the platform of the fifth wheel. So the platform goes all the way across there. It's not cracked or damaged or bent or broken, and it's securely fastened here. This is a sliding fifth wheel. So we have our locking pins here. We want to make sure that they're pushed all the way out and in the locked position. Next, we have our fifth wheel skid plate. So that's this whole plate. We want to check and make sure that it's not cracked or damaged or bent, it's not twisted, and it is properly lubricated. Next, I want to go ahead and go back to the mounting bolts. So that's all of these bolts here and all of these bolts along underneath here that are connecting this to the frame. Want to check to make sure that they're all present and tight. They're not cracked, damaged, or missing. Next, we've got our release arm. So the release arm, we're checking to make sure this is not bent, cracked, or damaged. And then also under here, there's a bunch of mechanisms. So there's a spring and other parts that it's connected to, that when you pull on that, it opens the locking jaw. So we want to check all those components to make sure that they're not cracked or damaged or broken, and they're all in place. And inside here is the locking jaw, so that's it right here. It's tucked in, but when it's connected properly, it will be going across this opening, the kingpin inside here, and locking the kingpin inside, not allowing it to come out. So that is the tractor side of the coupling system. On the trailer here, we've got the apron, so the underside here. Want to check and make sure that it's securely mounted to the trailer. It's not cracked or damaged or broken, and not bent. This is the kingpin, so this is what it looks like with the trailer dropped. It is not cracked, bent, damaged, broken. None of these little lips are busted off or damaged in any way. So when connected, we want to make sure that there is no gap between the fifth wheel skid plate and the apron. For the trailer, we're gonna check the bulkhead. So that's this whole front wall of the trailer. Want to make sure that it's not cracked, bent, or damaged. There's no bulging, so it's nice and flat across the front of that. That could be an indicator of damage on the inside of the trailer or the walls there. Want to check our clearance lights and any reflectors that may be there on the top of the trailer. Those we want to check and make sure they're securely mounted, they're not cracked, damaged, or missing, and they're the proper color, which is amber. Also want to make sure that there's no water condensation built up inside there. Again, on the front and the side, we're checking to make sure there's no cracks or damage, there's no missing or loose rivets, and not bulging or bent. The front here we have reflectors, so we want to check these, making sure they're in place, they're the proper color and clean. In the front it would be amber. And on the top here we have a clearance light. We want to check that. For the same thing, we check the clearance lights on the front of the trailer. Next we want to check our DOT reflective tape, making sure that's in place. It's covering at least 50% down the length of the trailer. We want to check the frame, making sure that it's not cracked, damaged, broken, it's not twisted, or not missing any rivets or bolts. Underneath, we want to check our cross members. Let me come over here a little bit more. So all these cross members we want to inspect, make sure that they're not cracked or damaged or bent. And then also the floor, making sure that there are no holes that are visible. Over here we have our landing gear. For the landing gear, we want to check the landing legs, making sure that they're straight up and down. That's front to back and side to side. The landing pad here on the bottom, or the base, we're checking to make sure that it's not bent or damaged. There's not a bunch of rocks or debris inside here, and that it is always raised all the way up in the fully raised position when you're driving. Want to check the crank handle here, making sure that it is in a stowed position and it works, cranking the landing gear up and down. We want to check our supports here, making sure that they're in place, not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. We want to check these other cross members and supports, making sure that they are securely connected with either welds or bolts, and they're not cracked, damaged, or missing. Okay, on the side of the trailer, coming back, we have another reflector here, and we have our turn indicator, four-way flasher, and marker lights. Want to make sure that these are both the proper color, which is amber. They're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. No loose or missing screws. There's no water condensation built up inside there, and they're working properly. Coming back here to the rear axle, gonna check our air hoses. I'm gonna start with the braking system. Check the air hoses, making sure that they're in place, they're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. They're securely mounted on both ends and there's no leaks. Want to check the brake chamber, making sure it's not cracked, damaged, bulging. There's no repair welds. The clamps are in place and tight, and there's no leaking. On the front side, or the back side there, is where the slack adjuster and push rod are. So that is the push rod and slack adjuster. Checking to make sure that the push rod is coming straight out of the brake chamber. It's not cracked, damaged, or bent, and there's no more than 1 inch of play. And the slack adjuster, checking to make sure that it's securely mounted, not cracked, damaged, and it is properly lubricated. Inside the back, we have our drum and linings. So the drum, checking to make sure it's not cracked, damaged, or broken. It's not worn too thin. It's not showing signs of overheating like bluing or cracking. There's no oil or debris inside there. The linings, we're checking to make sure that they are in place. They're not worn too thin, so a minimum thickness of 1/4 inch. They're not cracked, damaged, or broken, and they're not separating from the backing blade. Here we have our suspension system. So we've got our spring mounts. So this is our forward spring mount and then our rear spring mount. We're checking back there, making sure they're not cracked or damaged or broken. This one is welded in place, so we want to check and make sure there's no cracked or damaged welds. There's no illegal repair welds on this, and no loose or missing nuts or bolts. This here is the torque arm. So here, we're checking to make sure it's securely connected from the mount to the axle. It's not bent, damaged, or cracked. The bushings are in good condition on the inside here, and there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts that connect it to the mount. Next, we have our leaf springs. So here, they're stacked. Want to make sure that they're not cracked, damaged, broken. They're not scissoring, and securely mounted to the mounts here. We have our U-bolts. It's coming down here. On this one, the rounded part is on the bottom and the nuts are on the top. So we want to check all the nuts, making sure they're all tight, present, not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. Next, we have our tires. So we're going to check both tires, the sidewalls, inner and outer sidewalls, and the tread here, checking to make sure that it's not cracked, damaged. There's no bulges or abrasions or cuts along any of this. There are no chunks of tread missing. The minimum tread depth on the trailer tires is 2/32. And again, make sure we have even tread wear. And we'll find the valve stem here. Want to make sure that it is in place, it's not cracked or damaged, and we would check the inflation using a tire gauge to make sure it's at the proper level. And then with dual tires, we want to make sure that they're both at the same level and that they're also the same type of tire. Side here, we have our butt spacing. Want to check and make sure that there's no gap between the rims. There's nothing lodged in here, no rocks or debris, and no cracks or damage. The rims, we're going to check both rims inside and out, making sure there's no cracks, damage, and no illegal repair welds. Lug nuts, making sure they're all tight and they're all present. They're not cracked, damaged, split, or missing, and they're not showing signs of elongated bolt holes or distorted bolt holes. Here we've got our axle seal, or hub axle seal, making sure that it's not leaking, it's not cracked or damaged, and all the bolts are in place, so no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Okay. Towards the back of the trailer, we have our rear marker light and reflector. Want to check and make sure that they are the proper color, which is red. They're not cracked, damaged, or broken. They're securely mounted to the trailer, and no signs of condensation built up inside. And here we have our splash guards, checking to make sure they are not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. They cover the entire width of the tires, and at least 50% of the tires are not touching the ground or the tires. On the back of the trailer, I'll start at the top with our lights. We've got our clearance lights. We're checking to make sure that those are in place. They're not cracked, damaged, broken, no signs of water or condensation inside them, and they are the proper color, which is red. Back here, we have our turn indicator, right, left, four-way flashers, our marker lights, and our brake lights. To make sure that they are securely connected and mounted to the trailer. They're not cracked or damaged, and no signs of condensation built up inside there. This is our license plate light. Want to make sure that's secure and connected properly and working. We want to check to make sure the license plate is securely attached and the registration is current and up to date. Want to check the doors. We've got our DOT reflective tape along the doors, making sure that's in place, covering 100% of the width of the trailer. We also have some more down here and our bumper, making sure that it's clean and still reflective. There's no broken welds or cracks or damage on any of these parts, and everything is securely mounted. Next, we got our doors. We want to check the hinges, making sure that they're all connected properly. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and they're not bent, damaged, or cracked. We're checking all of those. We're checking the seal inside the door, making sure that it's in place, it's not damaged or cracked or missing. We've got our latches here. We want to make sure that the doors are connected properly latched properly and secured. So you want to make sure that it's all closed as it properly should be. So checking to make sure it's securely connected at the top and the bottom. Also on the doors, we have our reflectors. So our angle reflectors there, you want to make sure that those are in place. They're not cracked, damaged, broken, or missing, and that they're clean. This trailer has a side door on the passenger side. So this door, we want to inspect it the same way as we inspected the rear door, making sure that it's not cracked or damaged. Check the hinges. It has a good seal all the way around, and it's latched properly and closed. We also want to check the steps and the handle to get inside, making sure that these aren't cracked, damaged, broken, or missing. After you complete the exterior inspection, next we would do a light check, making sure all the lights are working. The driver would get inside, turn on clearance lights and marker lights, your right and left hand turn indicators, your four-way flashers, your headlights, and that's high beams and low beams. On the rear of the vehicle, you would check all the same lights. You've got your left turn, right turn, four-way flashers, marker lights, and brake lights. For the in-cab inspection, when you get in, check the mirrors. You're checking to make sure that they're not cracked or damaged. They're clean and they're adjusted properly to you as the driver. Next, we'll check the windshield. Make sure that it's not cracked or damaged. It has a good seal around it. It's clean and not leaking on the inside. Next, we'll check our safety belt. Make sure that it is not cracked, damaged, or broken. It's not worn, split, or frayed, and it connects and disconnects properly. Then we will do a safe start. So for a safe start, you turn the key to the on position. You check your warning lights, so the ABS light and diesel particulate filter lights. So they were there and there. Turn that off and back on again. So ABS light here, diesel particulate filter there. Those lights come on and then turn off. That's indicating that they are working properly. So next, I want to check and make sure that my parking brakes are set and that I am in neutral. I'm going to have my foot covering the brake, and then I'm going to check around the vehicle, make sure that nobody is leaning up against the vehicle. Then I will go ahead, turn the key, and start the vehicle. The first thing I want to check is my oil pressure. Make sure that it's rising. All right, so that's showing that that's working right. I want to double check my parking brake, make sure that's good, and double check that I am in neutral. And then I can take my foot away from the brake at that point. All right, so I'm gonna build the air pressure a little bit here, turn that off. I'm gonna go ahead and start with my gauges. So this is my water temperature gauge. I want to check to make sure that it is building and rises to the normal operating range or temperature. My oil pressure gauge, I want to make sure that it is rising and going to the normal operating range. The engine's cold, so it's a little bit higher than normal, and I've got the RPM up. You want to definitely make sure that it's above 20 to 25 PSI. I've got my tach here, the RPM gauge, as I accelerate and decelerate and make sure that that's working properly. Got my speedometer here. Want to make sure that that's working properly. It's not moving now, but when we do our check later, we can see if that's operating. This is our voltmeter. The voltmeter, we're checking to make sure that it is in place and that it's showing that we are charging between 12 and 15 volts. Fuel gauge, checking to make sure that I have enough fuel to go through my day today. And then I have my air gauges. This is my primary and my secondary air gauges. I want to check and make sure that they're not or I want to check and make sure that the air pressure is rising to the normal operating range and the governor cuts out between 120 and 140 psi. Now with all my gauges, I want to check and make sure there's no broken glass, there's no cracked or damaged gauges, there's no broken, bent, or loose or missing needles, and that I can see all the numbers and none of those are peeling up or damaged. Air gauges, I'll see when the governor cuts out. There, the governor just cut out, and it's right about 130, 135 psi. So that is working properly. Next, with my instrument panel, I want to check my interior lights. Checking my left turn indicator light comes on, my right turn indicator light comes on, my 4-way flashers come on, and then I want to check my high beam indicator, make sure that it comes on. So my lights are working properly. Coming back here a little bit, I want to check my horns, making sure that my air horn and my electric horn are working properly. I want to check the play in steering. I shouldn't have any more than 2 inches of play on a 20-inch steering wheel or 10% play. Next, I'm going to check my wipers. So I want to turn my wiper blades on and make sure that they're working at, the different speeds. They're not cracked or damaged. They're seated firmly up against the windshield and they're working properly. Also want to check the sprayer, make sure that it sprays properly. Which it does, and it's cleaning the windshield properly. So they are working well. Next, I'm going to come over here to the heating. I'm going to turn the fan on high, put it on hot, and it's on vent right now, so I'm checking the heater, making sure that that's blowing warm air, and that's working properly. Next, I'm going to move the selector to defrost, and then I'm going to check and make sure that air is coming out of the defroster vent, and that's working properly. I want to check my valves handles here and make sure that they're not cracked or damaged and that they're securely mounted and they're operating correctly. Next, I want to check my safety equipment. In here I have spare fuses. I want to make sure that I have either spare fuses or breakers depending on what the vehicle requires. I have my 3 reflective triangles here, checking to make sure that they're clean and not damaged, and again that I have at least 3. And then underneath here somewhere I have my fire extinguisher. So there it is. So I'm checking the fire extinguisher, making sure that it's in place, it's securely mounted to the vehicle, it's just not loosely rolling around. Also checking to make sure that it's fully charged and the correct type of fire extinguisher. Alright, so next I'm going to check the braking system. For the brakes, I'm going to check my parking brake and my trailer brake. So to do that, I'm going to have my foot on the brake. I'm going to release my parking brake and leave my trailer brake set. So I'm going to check my trailer brake and make sure that it's working properly and it doesn't move. I'm going to select drive and then kind of pull against. All right, so that's stopping. It's not allowing the trailer to move, so that brake is working properly. So I'm going to set my parking brake and release my trailer brake, and then put this back in drive. Make sure that I tug against this, and the tractor isn't moving, so the tractor brakes are working properly as well. Next, I'm going to release both and drive forward approximately 5 miles per hour and then apply the brakes. Now what I'm checking is to make sure that when I apply the service brake, which this is the service brake down here, the foot pedal, I want to make sure that the vehicle comes to a stop, as well as checking to make sure that it doesn't pull, the steering wheel doesn't jerk to the right or the left, making sure that we don't have sticking brakes on the front. So I'm going to go ahead and pull forward. Again, you want to reach approximately 5 miles per hour and then apply the brakes. And I did not pull to the right or the left, and my speedometer was working properly. So that's working good. I'm just going to back up a little bit here, back to my original position. Next, I want to check my air brake. So this is the automatic fail if this is not done completely incorrectly. So I've got my brakes released here, and I would get out and chock my wheels. And then what I'm going to do is check and make sure that my air is built up to governor cutout. So I just heard the governor cutout there. I want to make sure that my brakes are released and that I am in neutral. I'm going to turn the engine off and turn the key back to the on position. I'm going to check my air gauges here. So the first thing I'm going to do is fully apply my service brake, the foot pedal. I'm going to wait till the needles stop moving. Wait till the needles settle. All right, so that looks good about there. The pressure is approximately 110. I have a timer here. I'm going to check to make sure that I do not lose any more than 4 psi in 1 minute. So my needles are right about 110. Again, the brakes are fully applied. The parking brake is released. The key is on the on position and the engine is turned off. So we still have 33, 32, 31 seconds left to go. And again, I'm checking my gauges here to make sure that I am at the proper level. I lose no more than 4 psi in 1 minute. And you do need to hold that for a full minute. All right, so that's been 1 minute, and it looks like I've lost approximately 2 psi during that minute. So I'm allowed to lose up to 4 psi, so that is working properly. Next, I'm going to check my low air indicator, warning light, and buzzer. Make sure that they come on above 55 psi. So I'm going to start pumping the brakes, and then I'm watching the gauges here and checking for my warning light and the buzzer. So the lights just came on here. The buzzer came on. It's about 65 psi. That is above 55 psi, so that is working properly. Next, I'm going to check and see when my tractor protection valves pop out. So the pop out test. So I'm going to watch these valves here, and I'm going to continue pumping down, and the buttons or the valves pop out between 20 and 40 psi. So I'm going to watch the valves and make sure that they both pop out. All right, so they popped out. I'm going to stop pumping. Then I'm going to come over here and check the pressure. It's at 30 psi. That is working properly. So the air brake test is good on this truck. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and perform another safe start. I'll check and make sure that my brakes are set. I am in neutral. checking around my vehicle, making sure that nobody is around or leaning up against the vehicle. I have my foot covering the service brake. I'm going to start the truck. Double check my parking brakes are set, double check I'm in neutral, and check that I have oil pressure. At that point, I can take my foot away from the service brake, and I'm going to build the air pressure back up to the normal operating range. And that's the in-cab inspection.